Hi, I'm Dan, this is at Midlife Crisis Motorcyclist, and this is the new CCM Street Moto, quite possibly Bolton's answer to the much hyped Ducati Hypermotard 698 Mono, which is possibly not something you had on your motorcycling bingo card, but here we are. Now, I've ridden a CCM on the channel before, and at that point I had a bit of a deep dive into the brand's fascinating history, and if you need to catch up on that, click the link. But just to summarise, it's known for building kind of competition off-road machines, and also its range of boutique British engineered bikes which it builds back in its base in Bolton. Try saying that after a couple. Now, CCM's heritage might be those of trials bikes, scramblers, enduro bikes, that kind of thing, but more recently it's become better known for its more road optimised lineup of retro bobbers, flat trackers, scramblers, that kind of thing, all built around this shared and very distinctive tubular steel frame built from TIG welded 4130 chromoly and using a Husqvarna derived 600cc single cylinder engine. Now, although that only puts out around 55 horsepower, as you probably guessed, the bikes are really light, and based on experience of riding the Maverick, I can say that they are as fun and exciting to ride as the looks might suggest. Now, this Street Moto takes CCM off in a slightly different direction. It's a bit less retro than the rest of the range, a bit more contemporary and kind of inspired by modern supermoto bikes, although with a bit of a distinctive CCM twist along the way. It's not actually the first Street Moto they've made. The previous one had a little bit more bodywork on it, all things relative, but the guys at CCM apparently thought it didn't quite fit with the whole brand image, so they've had a rethink, stripped it all back to the absolute bare basics, and here we are. Now, the Street Moto range starts at £9,995, which puts it into contention with some pretty mainstream rivals and sounds quite reasonable for such a boutique bike, doesn't it? So, in CCM's press material with the bike, they list potential alternatives as Yamaha MT-07, Triumph Trident 660, even the BSA Gold Star, which I'm not sure I see myself, but anyway, to me this is more your kind of classic supermoto bike, so up against the likes of the KTM 690 SMC R or the Husqvarna 701 Supermoto, and of course that Ducati Hypermotard 698 Mono with its super exotic Panigale derived single cylinder engine. Now, the starting price actually undercuts all of those bikes, but by the time you get to the Street Moto R that you see here with its kind of underseat exhaust, its Dimag wheels, this fancy remote reservoir rear shock and a few other bits and bobs, it actually costs £11,495, and that's before you start decking it out with all the kind of carbon fibre bits and CNC machine goodies that CCM will only too gladly help you out with. And that actually makes it slightly more expensive than the base Hypermotard. Punchy, right? But just look at it, it's an absolutely stunning looking machine, and it looks super trick and so minimal compared with those other bikes that they could almost be kind of full dress tourers in comparison, couldn't they? The attention to detail is also absolutely exquisite, and if it goes as well as it looks, then what we could have here is a homegrown Ducati killer. Is it really though? Well, let's go for a ride and find out. Right, so probably the most important consideration before we get to the bike is what are you meant to wear on a supermoto style machine like this? Because after all, you see people wearing everything from kind of full racing leathers to kind of, if you're in the south of France, kind of speedos and flip-flops, don't you? Well, you'll be very glad to hear it's not speedo and flip-flops weather, because I don't think anybody wants to see me in that kind of get-up. So I've kind of gone for the adventure-laden kind of textiles mix and match approach. So anyway, sartorial queries aside, what do you get on this Street Moto? Well, it's probably more a question of what you don't get, because the bike looks minimal and it's pretty minimal in its features. So traction control on the Street Moto, wheelie control and rider mode are basically controlled by this thing here. So the more you turn it, the faster it goes, the more it wheelies, the more it does things like that. So there's your rider modes. Braking, well, ABS in CCM land is grab the lever really hard, the brakes lock, and if you grab it slightly less hard, they don't. There you go, that's your kind of multi-mode ABS taken care of. But joking aside, that is quite a big contrast with the Hypermotard and the KTM and the Husqvarna that I talked about in the intro, because they're all packed with, you know, all the kind of modern rider aids you could wish for. But on this bike, it really is just you and the bike, which does somewhat focus the attention on a day like this when the roads are all greasy and, you know, the conditions are slightly difficult to read because no safety nets whatsoever, but we'll do our best. I think, yes, raw is a word you'll hear a lot when it comes to riding a bike like this, and you'll be getting it from the sound of the engine, which really is, unsurprisingly, right at the heart of the riding experience. It's certainly very noisy, which is nice, and with that kind of, you know, pint of petrol and air exploding between your legs, you certainly have a very intimate connection with what it's doing in terms of vibrations, in terms of where it is in the rev range and stuff like that. And when you combine that with a really slick gearbox, you don't really change gears, kind of think your way through the gearbox. You waggle your toe and the gear's just gone through, and it's just so precise. It's like you almost deliberately catch the ignition stroke on the engine when you come to grip it. So, you know, just a little bit like that. It's just lovely how kind of intimate your connection with the engine and the gearbox and everything else on the bike is. So, yeah, there's nowhere to hide on this bike, but that's all part of the fun. Yeah, and as I was saying, that kind of intimate connection with everything the bike's doing, it's just so, it just really fires you up, and it makes it a very intense riding experience. But then, isn't that what you want out of a motorbike, especially one that looks like this? And the fact that kind of every millimetre you crack the throttle unleashes a different experience just makes it loads of fun. And although 55 horsepower doesn't sound like much, it's enough to put a smile on your face. And when you set it against the fact that this bike weighs just 145 kilos, it's kind of enough to really make it feel like a load of fun. But true, it's down on power a little bit compared with the Hypermotard and the Husqvarna and the KTM. All of those have got 70 plus horsepower, but it doesn't feel ever like it's lacking in acceleration. The way it just responds instantly to the throttle, and the noise it makes when you do that is just super addictive. And then you get to the handling, which is just so trackable. You know, basically feels like a 125, but just a very, very powerful one with kind of a level of handling that you wouldn't expect on a on a learner bike, that's for sure. And one area where this bike differs from the kind of Hypermotard and the KTM and the Husqvarna is suspension. So where they have, you know, lots of suspension travel, you know, over 200 millimeters, the CCM's only got, I think, about 120, and it really feels it as well. This is not a comfortable bike. It's, I'm going to say it's pretty harsh, and you can feel those bumps. There's not much in the way of padding on the seat either, so this is not a comfortable bike by any stretch. But then that all kind of fits with the image and what it's for. You know, you don't buy a bike like this for long distance comfort. You buy it because it's an absolute hoot to kind of go around. And sure, while the supermoto image is all about skids and wheelies and stoppies and all that kind of thing, you're not going to be seeing any of that in this video, rest assured, because I'm not that kind of rider, but it makes you feel like you are, even if you're not actually doing all that. So that's really cool, and basically the riding experience is just so intense. And on a day like this, and you get a kind of stolen couple of hours between the range hours, and you just want to go out and get a quick life-affirming blast, enjoy the views and all that kind of thing, this bike is in its element. And certainly for a beginner like me, it does focus the attention somewhat, not having any rider aids or anything like that. But I think that's kind of a good thing, because it makes you ride within yourself a bit more. You know, you're not going to take any stupid risks, because you're not going to get away with them. So, you know, every kind of gear change and brake input has to be spot on. And I've noticed that the rear brake is very powerful as well. So, I guess if you do want to do the super moto thing of dragging the back wheel around the corners and all that, you can do that. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy riding it in a slightly more sensible fashion, all things relative. But what I love about it is, even when you do that, it sounds like you're riding it like a hooligan, and that's kind of half the point, isn't it? So, to get you into that spirit. So, is it a Hypermotard killer, like I said in the intro? Well, I don't know, I've not ridden a Hypermotard yet, but it's certainly a very interesting alternative, isn't it? And if you want your kind of boutique bike, it definitely ticks those boxes. I think to really judge it, I'm going to have a go on a Hypermotard, aren't I? But on this first impression, this Street Moto is a barrel of laughs, and something a bit different for CCM, but a lot of fun, a lot of fun. So there we go, that's a quick flavour of the new CCM Street Moto. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did, but then you probably got that impression from the video, didn't you? Is it a true kind of supermoto contender and a rival for the Hypermotard and the Husqvarna and the KTM, like I said in the intro? Having ridden it, I'm not sure that it is. I think it kind of makes sense to call it a street moto because it doesn't have the kind of the long travel suspension and all those other things that the kind of established supermoto bikes have. It's kind of its own thing, and perhaps the better for it. I do appreciate on this bike the fact that it doesn't have any of the kind of electronic aids or interference or anything like that that you get on those kind of modern bikes. What you get out of the Street Moto is as good as what you put in. There's kind of nowhere to hide on a bike like this, and that's kind of all part of the charm. It's a very raw riding experience in every sense. And kind of in its way, although it does have limitations in terms of the comfort, it's not a comfy bike at all. The suspension is really firm, the saddle is minimal, to say the least. It's not a bike going to rack up big miles on, but again, it celebrates that fact. The fact that it doesn't have a huge range of talents, but it is very good at what it does. That to me is really attractive. It's also interesting the fact that it's priced at a level which at least makes the whole CCM thing look a bit more accessible than perhaps it has in the past. So I'm not sure it is a rival for an MT-07 or a Trident 660, but you know, the idea that you could look at that and go, oh, it's less than 10 grand, that's an interesting move for CCM, and it's got to be a positive as well, hasn't it? Are there any things that I'd change about the bike? Well, if there are any niggles, this kind of spare mounting bracket for the second brake that isn't there on the forks, that looks a bit ugly. I think if it's like the Maverick, you can get a twin brake setup, but it's very expensive and probably a bit much given the bike weighs so little. The kind of dirt bike side stand really freaks me out as well. The way it just springs up as soon as you unweight the bike, that just yeah, it gives me the willies, and it's I did sort of trip over it at one point when I was trying to put it down as well. It's not too easy when you park up, and the idea of dropping a bike as pretty as this is just utterly terrifying, so that does worry me a little bit as well. But apart from that, I've really enjoyed the riding experience, and it's nice to get on a CCM just as they come as well, without all the kind of, as nice as all the kind of CNC'd extras and all that kind of thing is, it's, you know, it's nice to just see how they come straight out of the box. So yeah, a really cool bike. I've really enjoyed riding it a lot, and I'd be interested to hear your views as well, so join me in the comments thread below. If you like the video, make sure you tick like as well, and if you're not subscribing to the channel already, please do so. And with that, I'll say thanks for watching, goodbye, and ride safe.